الحمد لله رب العالمين إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستهديه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا أما بعد فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وإن شر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. All praise and thanks belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the creator, the sustainer, the maintainer. May His peace and blessings be upon His final messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Whomsoever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides, there is no one who can misguide him. And whomsoever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala misguides due to his own intentions and his own actions, then there is no one that can guide him. I bear witness that there is none worthy of worship except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I bear witness that Muhammad ibn Abdullah is his servant and his final messenger. My brothers and sisters in Islam, we should take some time and thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the blessings that we have in our lives. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in the Holy Quran, وَمَا بِكُم مِّن نِعْمَةٍ فَمِنَ اللَّهِ. That whatever blessings that you may find in your life, whatever good that you may see, it is only from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if you were to count these blessings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you, you'll never be able to do so. But from these blessings, they are not all equal. These blessings are of varying degrees. And there is no doubt about it that the greatest blessing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala He gives a person is ni'mat al-Islam. As Ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu anhu, he says that Allah, He gives this wealth, the wealth of this world, to whom He likes and whom He does not like. The greatest of tyrants, the greatest of oppressors, they have all the wealth and power of this world. Allah gives it to them. But Allah only gives Iman and Islam to those whom He loves. And so from being from the grateful slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that we constantly remember this. And that we remember that we have been given Al-Iman and Al-Islam. Now this blessing, it comes from a long time ago. It comes from the time of Ibrahim alayhi salam, who is Khalilullah, the one who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took as a personal friend. He is the one who established the foundation of Al-Islam. The Kaaba that we all know and that we all love, it is him and his son Ismail alayhi salam who raised its foundations. It's already been built before, many times, but they reconstructed the foundations. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells us, وَإِذْ يَرْفَعُ إِبْرَاهِيمُ الْقَوَاعِدَ مِنَ الْبَيْتِ وَإِسْمَاعِيلُ رَبَّنَا تَقَبَّلْ مِنَّا إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ السَّمِيعُ الْعَلِيمُ. When Ibrahim alayhi salam, he raised the foundations of the house and his son Ismail, and the first thing they said was, "Oh Allah, accept this from us." Imagine, Allah commanded him to build it, and he's still asking Allah to accept it from him. And then Ibrahim alayhi salam, he begins to make dua. And the consequence and the answering of this dua is us sitting here today. You are the response. You and I are the response of the dua of Ibrahim alayhi salam. As he says, رَبَّنَا وَاجْعَلْنَا مُسْلِمَيْنِ لَكَ وَمِنْ ذُرِّيَّتِنَا أُمَّةً مُسْلِمَةً لَكَ وَأَرِنَا مَنَاسِكَنَا وَتُبْ عَلَيْنَا إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ التَّوَّابُ الرَّحِيمُ. Ibrahim alayhi salam, he says, "Oh Allah, make us Muslims to you, make us submitting to you, and from our children make an ummah that is also submitting to you." And then Ibrahim alayhi salam, he continues this dua, رَبَّنَا وَابْعَثْ فِيهِمْ رَسُولًا مِّنْهُمْ يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِكَ وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ. O Allah, bring out from amongst them, take from amongst them, and bring to them a messenger from them, reciting upon them your ayat, your verses, and he teaches them your book, al-kitab, وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَاب, the book, wal-hikmah. Hikmah here, the scholars they say this is the sunnah. So the book and the sunnah together, وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ, and he purifies them. إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ الْعَزِيزُ الْحَكِيمُ. Indeed, you are the mighty, the all-wise. So the response of this dua, Allah answered this dua. What was the response of this dua? You see, when Ibrahim alayhi salam, when he made this dua, he put it in a certain order. There's a tartib in this dua. He first asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow this messenger to teach them from the book, and then to purify them. But when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he answered this dua, he flipped the order. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, هُوَ الَّذِي بَعْثَ فِي الْأُمِّيِّينَ رَسُولًا مِّنْهُمْ يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِهِمْ وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ. Allah, he answered this dua. And he says, there has come amongst them, from them, a messenger, an unlettered prophet, who recites to them the ayat, and he purifies them. And then he teaches them from the book and the sunnah and the hikmah. So why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make this switch? Because from the greatest principles of this religion is tazkiyatun nafs, the purification of the soul. Purification of the soul is needed before the teaching of the book and the wisdom. Because if a person does not remove the lowliness and the impurity from his heart, then what benefits is the book and the hikmah and the sunnah will be to them? If you have impurities in something, the only way to fill it up with goodness is to first remove the impurity and then start decorating it. So much so that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in His Quran Al-Kareem, He makes an oath. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes an oath, it's for a specific reason. Now we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is truthful when He speaks. وَمَنْ أَصْدَقُ مِنَ اللَّهِ قِيلًا. There is no one more truthful than Allah. So when he says something, it is the truth, it is the haqq. But when he takes an oath upon something, that's to put some emphasis. And we see in Surah Ash-Shams, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He makes a number of oaths. He swears by multiple things. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can swear by anything of His creation. But we can only swear by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so He begins and He says, وَالشَّمْسِ وَدُحَاهَا, by the sun and the bright day. So He begins the surah by making two oaths. وَالشَّمْسِ وَدُحَاهَا وَالْقَمَرِ إِذَا تَلَاهَا, and the moon as it follows the sun. That's three. وَالْقَمَرِ إِذَا تَلَاهَا وَالنَّهَارِ إِذَا جَلَّاهَا, and the nahar, the day, as there's activity in it. That's four. وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا يَغْشَاهَا, and the night as it covers. That's five. وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا يَغْشَاهَا وَالنَّهَارِ إِذَا جَلَّاهَا وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا يَغْشَاهَا وَالسَّمَاءِ وَمَا بَنَاهَا, and the sky and the one who raised it. How many is that? That's two more. That's seven. وَالسَّمَاءِ وَمَا بَنَاهَا وَالْأَرْضِ وَمَا طَحَاهَا, and the earth and the one who flattened it. That's two more. That's nine. وَالْأَرْضِ وَمَا طَحَاهَا وَنَفْسٍ وَمَا سَوَّاهَا, and the soul and the one who fashioned it. That's two more. That's 11. What is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what does He want to say? He's made oath after oath after oath after oath after oath after oath. What is this big important message, Ya Allah? فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا, and the soul, when it knows the despicable acts, when a person does a despicable act, the soul knows it. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا. This is the message. All of those oaths, one after the other, just to say this: the successful one is the one who purifies it. The successful one is the one who purifies its soul. قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. And the loser, the one who will be humiliated, is the one who covers it. What does it mean by dassaha, to cover it? Meaning to fill your life with the disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Fill your life with sin and transgressions. And your soul knows it, but you're covering it up. You're piling it up. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells us the reason for this. He tells us the reason why we do this in Surah Al-A'la. He says, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ تَزَكَّى وَذَكَرَ اسْمَ رَبِّهِ فَصَلَّى بَلْ تُؤْثِرُونَ الْحَيَاةَ الدُّنْيَا. Rather, you held on to this dunya. وَالْآخِرَةُ خَيْرٌ وَأَبْقَى. But the hereafter, that is what is better and more long-lasting. And so we see from this the importance of purifying the soul. And purifying the souls, the ulama, they have great books on it, many, many books. There's even a science for it. They call it ilm al-suluk, the knowledge of traveling, of the travel to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the journey to Allah. Because the journey to Allah is not a physical journey. It's not one that you need your bodily strength. The journey to Allah is in the hearts. And so from these principles that they bring out in Tazkiyatun Nafs is that the first thing that a person needs is an awakening. To wake up from the heedlessness. That's number one. Because if a person does not realize that he's living in a heedlessness, then he won't be able to change himself. So that's the first principle, the awakening. And then the second principle is to know the paths that make you go astray. It is one thing to know the path of guidance, but it is another thing to have knowledge of those paths that take you astray. I'll give you an example. In Surah Al-Fatiha that we read every single day, we say, Ihdina as-sirat al-mustaqim. Oh Allah, guide us to the straight path. Sirat al-ladhina an'amta alayhim. The path of those of whom you have bestowed your favor upon. Now you would think that would be enough. That's sufficient. Ask Allah to guide you to the straight path. But we don't end there. غَيْرِ الْمَغْضُوبِ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا الضَّالِينَ. And not the path of those whom have earned your anger. And not the path of those whom have gone astray. Why? Because it's not enough for a Muslim to just know the path of guidance. That's not enough. You have to know the other paths and to know how to stay away from it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, لا إكراه في الدين قد تبين الرشد من الغي فمن يكفر بالطاغوت ويؤمن بالله. Whoever disobeys in the taghut and then believes in Allah. So there's that aspect of negating the false gods and then to believe. Another example, in the Shahada, what do we say in the Shahada? We say, La ilaha illallah. An-nafi wal-ithbat. The negation and then the affirmation. Because first you have to negate all of the false gods. You have to remove everything. This is what tazkiyatun nafs is. First you have to remove all of the things that lead you astray. And then you come on the path of guidance. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين له الحمد الحسن والثناء الجميل وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. We've spoken about the importance of tazkiyatun nafs, the importance of purifying one's soul. And we talked about some of the principles. First, we need that awakening to wake up from this heedlessness that we're in. And the second principle is to know the different paths that lead one away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And from these paths is to know who your enemy is. From these paths is to know who is trying to stop you from achieving this goal. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He describes shaitan in the Quran, He uses one word in relation to the human being. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, إِنَّ الشَّيْطَانَ لَكُمْ عَدُوٌ فَاتَّخِذُوهُ عَدُوًّا. Indeed, the shaitan to you is an enemy. So take him as an enemy. Now when you think about it, what's an enemy? Why did Allah use this word to describe your relationship with shaitan? Now an enemy is someone that opposes you, an adversary, someone who wants to stop you from reaching your goal, and you want to stop him from reaching his goal. And so the question is, what is the goal? What is the aim of shaitan? What does he want? A simple, very, very simple. Shaitan, he told Allah, that's my only aim. لَأُغْوِيَنَّهُمْ أَجْمَعِينَ. To misguide every single one of them. That's it. Shaitan does not care if you sin once. Everybody sins. كل بني آدم خطاء. Everybody sins. But the aim of the shaitan is to take you off the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إِلَّا عِبَادَكَ مِنْهُمُ الْمُخْلَصِينَ. Except for those slaves that you have chosen. And in another qira'ah, إِلَّا عِبَادَكَ مِنْهُمُ الْمُخْلِصِينَ. Except for those slaves who are sincere to you. And so we get from this that the only way that one can reach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and disrupt the aim of shaitan is to be from the sincere slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To worship Him sincerely and to obey Him and to glorify Him. This is what will divert the goal of shaitan. And so by knowing this, one will start to make their journey to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when one starts to make their journey to Allah, as we said, the most important thing is to have that awakening. We're living in a cycle, my brothers and sisters. Day in, day out, on the hamster wheel, until we fall off, and then somebody else comes on that hamster wheel. We need to wake up. One of the tricks of the shaitan is that he plays the long game. Shaitan does not start with you. Shaitan does not play in terms of the minutes and the days. He plays in terms of centuries. He starts with you by weakening your religion, by watering down your religion, by neglecting the salat. But you're still Muslim. You're still, mashallah, coming to Eid, coming to Jumu'ah. But he knows that this is going to influence the next generation. He knows that the kids are watching. And when the kids are watching, they see that their parents, they don't really take Islam to be that big deal. And this is how shaitan works. Centuries. He's thinking 100 years ahead. Because if he knows that if you do not uphold your religion, do not give honor to your religion, then the next generation, they're also going to lower it. And then lower it. And then lower it. How many stories of people do we know? They came from their home countries here hundreds of years ago. But then they assimilated. They went with the culture. And years down the line, today their great-grandchildren, they know nothing about Islam. Shaitan, he works in terms of centuries. And that's his goal. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep us steadfast upon His path. We ask Him subhanahu wa ta'ala that He weaken the plots of shaitan. We ask Him subhanahu wa ta'ala that He removes the deception of shaitan from us. رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ رَبَّنَا لَا تُزِغْ قُلُوبَنَا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب اللهم انصر إخواننا المستضعفين في فلسطين اللهم انصر إخواننا المستضعفين في فلسطين اللهم انصرهم على عدوهم اللهم انصرهم على عدوهم اللهم افرغ علينا صبرا اللهم افرغ علينا صبرا وثبت أقدامنا وانصرنا على القوم الكافرين ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار عباد الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون وأقيموا الصلاة. Please fill in any gaps. Shoulder to shoulder, feet to feet. Don't leave any gaps, inshallah. If there's space in front of you, please move up. Don't forget to make dua in your sujood. Allahu Akbar. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين والشمس وضحاها والقمر إذا تلاها والنهار إذا جلاها والليل إذا يغشاها والسماء وما بناها والأرض وما طحاها ونفس وما سواها فألهمها فجورها وتقواها قد أفلح من زكاها وقد خاب من دساها كذبت ثمود بطغواها إذ انبعث أشقاها فقال لهم رسول الله ناقة الله وسقياها فكذبوه فعقروها فدمدم عليهم ربهم بذنبهم فسواها ولا يخاف عقباها الله أكبر سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد الله أكبر سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.